welcome to your biology lesson. I'm going to be your teacher for today, and my name is Kilebukile Ananias. So today we are going to be doing the topic biodiversity. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, the biodiversity topic is not in the Science Double Awards or syllabus, so we're just going to be dealing with the pure biology students for today. So, biodiversity. Biodiversity, what is biodiversity? Biodiversity means, first of all, let's separate it. We have bio, then we have diversity. So bio means life or living organisms, and diversity means a variety. So we can put it together and say biodiversity means a variety of living organisms. We have a lot of living organisms. Some we can see, some we cannot see because they're just microscopic and we need a microscope to see them. So today we're going to be going through all of them. So to study biodiversity, we're going to group these living organisms of ours into groups which we may call kingdoms. So we have 5 kingdoms. 5 kingdoms being Kingdom Monera, which consists of bacteria and algae. And then we have Kingdom Protista, which consists of protozoa and protophilia. We'll talk more about that. And then we have Kingdom Fungi, which will also go in detail into. And then we have plants or plantae. That one we are very familiar with. It talks about the flowering and the non-flowering plants. We've done it since primary school. We've known that there are flowering plants and the non-flowering plants, right? And then finally we have Kingdom Animalia. Kingdom Animalia is the one that includes us as human beings. It has vertebrates and invertebrates. Now I'm talking about something that's kind of familiar, right? So vertebrates are ones that have a backbone, and invertebrates do not have a backbone. So those are our 5 kingdoms, my dear students, that we're going to be going into in detail. Now, how are we going to explain these kingdoms? What are we going to be focusing on as we categorize them? So, to categorize these living organisms of ours, we're going to be looking at physical characteristics, how they are, what they're made up of, and such. And then another category we're going to be looking into is feeding or nutrition. That is, how do they get their nutrition, their food? How do they have energy to go on, to live? And then finally, the last category is reproduction. Reproduction, how do they continue their generation? How do they give birth to the young ones? Alright, now like we have said, we're going to categorize our living organisms in terms of the characteristic, how they feed, and how they reproduce. So here I've made a very simple table for you that is summarized and straight to the point. So I have kingdom, and then we're going to talk about that kingdom structure, and then we're going to talk about how that kingdom feeds, as well as how it reproduces. Let's start off with Kingdom Monera. Kingdom Monera, like we have already mentioned, has the bacteria and the algae, blue algae. you may notice that there's blue algae and then there's algae. Algae is with the non-flowering plants, but we'll get there. And so the structure of Chimonera is that they're unicellular. Unicellular meaning they have only one cell. And they don't have a nucleus, and they exist in they come in different shapes. They are rods, they are spheres, and then there are spirals. Rods, spheres, and spirals. Those are the shapes that Chimonera comes in. And then their feeding, how do they feed? They are autotrophic. Autotrophic because they possess some kind of chlorophyll. That is, they make their own food through the process of photosynthesis. And some of them are parasitic. Parasitic meaning they have to have a host. They live inside their host and feed through the host. And some are saprophytes. Saprophytes meaning they feed from dead matter. They feed from animals and other organisms that are dead. And they are saprophytes. Saprophytes meaning they feed on dead matter, either dead animals or any other dead organism. And now we go on to reproduction. Reproduction, how both asexually and sexually. Asexually, here there is no fusion of gametes, and sexually there is fusion of the male and the female gametes. They reproduce asexually by the process of binary fission. Binary fission meaning they break into two, that is by two. And then sexually is genetic recombination. The genes, their genes combine. Like I've said, sexually there's fusion of those gametes. Now that is that about kingdom Monera. Now let's move on to the next kingdom. The next kingdom is Protista. Protista, which consists of the protozoa and the Prophyta. Protozoa behave like animals. They are animal-like. And then the Prophyta behave like plants. And their structure, they are unicellular, meaning one cell, like I have already mentioned. And then they have a nucleus, unlike the kingdom Monera, which doesn't have a nucleus. And then they have chlorophyll. They have a bit of chlorophyll. Chlorophyll here in this case would be in the Prophyta because it's the one that we said they are plant-like. Right. And their feeding, they are heterotrophic. They feed from other animals, or they feed on other organisms. They either eat other animals or plants. They are heterotrophic. And because they have chlorophyll, they are also autotrophic. That is, they make their own food through the process of photosynthesis. And then, how do they make young ones? How do they continue their generation? They are asexually. They make young ones asexually through the process of binary fission, which I've already explained. Yes, so that is that about the kingdom Protista. Now we move on to the fungi. Fungi, my dear students, is unicellular too. That is, it has one cell, like I've already mentioned, and they lack chlorophyll. They do have chlorophyll, but it's a bit small. And that body is usually mycelium. Mycelium meaning it's made of a combination of fibers. I bet you have seen fungi before, usually on bread. That green item that is on bread, that is fungi. So it's It's kind of like threads if you look at it closely. Yes, that is what we mean by they are usually mycelium. And then fungi is non-mortal. It does not move. If it's on that bread, on that tomato, it's just there and it cannot move to other places. And then how do they feed? How do they obtain their energy? They are saprophytes. Saprophytes, if you remember, I said that they feed on decayed matter or dead matter. Yeah. Because when your bread comes to have fungi, it means it has gone bad, right? The parasitic, that is why you have seen diseases such as ringworm. They are caused by fungi. They live inside you and reproduce inside you, and they eat from, not necessarily you, their host. Yes, if you have ringworm, then in that case you are the host. And then, yeah, they are parasitic. Now, how do they continue their generation, their reproduction? They reproduce sexually through the process of conjugation. And also, they reproduce asexually. Asexually by forming spores which later fall off and become other fungus, or by budding, which is common in yeast. Another very common fungi we know is yeast. Budding is when the organism form buds which later fall off and become a whole organism on their own. Now, we have talked about Monera, we have talked about Protista, we talked about fungi, 3 kingdoms so far. And what you can notice among these kingdoms that we talked about is that they are all unicellular, right? Protista and the fungi have the nucleus. The Monera here does not have a nucleus. Now we're going to move on to the ones that are kind of familiar to us, that is the plants and the animals. The plants are divided into 2, that is their flowering plants and they are non-flowering plants. Now, in those flowering and non-flowering plants, when you get to flowering, we further divide them into monocotyledons and dicotyledons. Monocotyledons have only one leaf in their seed. Like when they sprout, only one leaf comes through when they germinate. And then with the dicotyledon, they have 2 leaves in their seed. When they germinate, 2 leaves comes up. And now let's do monocotyledons and dicotyledons in terms of differences. Monocotyledons have fibrous roots. The roots are fibrous. You've seen the roots of grass. And the dicotyledons have a taproot. And the dicotyledons have netted veins, like they have veins in their leaves which are netted. And then the monocotyledons, the veins are parallel. Think of a grass leaf and a leaf you get from just a leafy plant, any leafy plant, like a leafy tree. And what they have in common is that they all have leaves. They have large leaves, or where photosynthesis happens, because they are all autotrophic. We're talking about flowering plants here. And they have a vascular system. This vascular system is the one that facilitates the transport of water and the transport of nutrients and the transport of food. And they also have an ovary. An ovary, that is the one that facilitates the reproduction. And another, how do they feed? They are autotrophic, like I have mentioned before. They have they have huge leaves which are infested or concentrated with chlorophyll, so they make their food through photosynthesis. So they're autotrophic. And then we have the non-flowering plants are the algae. You've seen probably in water when there's that green pigment. That green pigment is called algae, and algae, the greenish item shows that is chlorophyll. So algae also is autotrophic, just like all the other plants. And now let's go to the reproduction of plants. How do they reproduce? Plants reproduce sexually. There's fusion of gametes. Gametes, in this case, we are talking about the ovum and the sex cell, which comes from the filaments, the anthers. So it is entirely sexual. But yeah, they reproduce sexually. And then we have kingdom Animalia. Finally, Animalia deals with the vertebrates and the invertebrates, like we have mentioned before. The vertebrates have the backbone and the invertebrates do not have a backbone. The vertebrates are divided into 5 groups, which are fish. We have fish, we have birds, we have mammals, we have reptiles, and amphibians. Amphibians examples would be frogs and toads. Reptiles would be lizards. And the examples of mammals would be animals like cow, lion, person. And then the examples of fish would be the eel, all those fish you see, the eel, the tilapia, the one that we eat often, and bears, just normal bears we see every day. And then we have invertebrates. Invertebrates are divided into insects, arachnids. Insects would include the cockroaches, the ants. Arachnids would include the spiders, the scorpions. And we have the myriapods. The myriapods are our millipedes and the centipedes, the ones that have very long segments. And then finally we have the crustaceans. The crustaceans are the ones that have the hard shells, the crabs. So our invertebrates have characteristics. Since, like I already said, we have the insects. The insects have 3 pairs of legs, that is 6 legs. And then they have 3 body segments, the head, the thorax, and the antennae. And then the arachnids have, the insects have wings, they have 2 wings. And we have the arachnids, which have 2 body segments, and they have 4 pairs of legs, that is 8 legs. And they have no wings. And then the myriapods, I bet everyone has seen a centipede or a millipede before. A millipede has a lot of segments and it has a lot of legs, right? And they do not possess wings. And finally, the crustaceans. The crustaceans are our crabs. Our crabs do not have wings and they have 2 pairs of antennae. And their legs differ in size. Some have like 14 legs, some 10. So that is that about our biodiversity in Nigerian students. That is how diverse our life, our living organisms are. Now, if you know about biodiversity, you may notice that I did not talk about the viruses. The viruses cause quite a confusion because they cannot live outside a host. They can only live when they're inside a host. And also, they do not have cells. They are what we call acellular. Yes. Now, thank you for watching, and I hope it was fruitful for you. I'll upload notes for your further understanding, and if there's one point that you did not understand thoroughly, do not feel free to comment below the video. Thank you.